Hello and welcome back to Animated Banners with CSS. In this lesson, we're going to get started making it snow in our banner by creating a keyframed animation in CSS. Now, we've talked before about how this animation is going to work, but let me very briefly recap what we discussed. If you remember, we took our snow images and we made them twice as tall as the banner itself. And let's take the front snow layer, for example, the one with the larger flakes of snow. The bottom half of this image is going to be identical to the top half of the snow image. So all of the flakes that we see here in the banner, all of those are duplicated in the bottom half of the snow image. But what we're going to do is we're going to take this snow image and push it up so that the bottom edge of the snow image is aligned with the bottom edge of the banner. Then we're going to animate that bottom edge downwards by giving the bottom property a negative value, and we're going to animate that downwards 300 pixels, which is the height of our banner, or half the height of our snow image. Once we animate it down 300 pixels, it will look identical to the way it did when we first started the animation, and then it will loop back to the beginning, so it will give us a seamless loop. So let's jump into our code and see how we can make that happen. We're going to open up TextMate here. And just to ease confusion a little bit, I'm going to put all of our animations in a separate CSS file because it's going to get crowded pretty quickly. So I'm going to right click on this banner 08 folder, which is the new folder that we're working in now. All the changes we make in this lesson will be saved in that banner 08 folder. In that folder, I'm going to add a new file. I'm going to call it animations.css. So we'll put all our animations in here, and then we'll just import that into our other CSS file. So we can go back into banner.css, and then just beneath our import statement for our fonts, we'll create another @import statement. And for our URL here, we'll just point to animations.css. So we'll save that, and then go back to your animations.css folder. Now, in order to create these animations, we'll actually need to create a few different versions of them with different vendor prefixes, because right now the default @keyframes rule doesn't work for all browsers, even for all of the most recent versions of all browsers. For example, I'm using Chrome to test my site, and this @keyframes rule doesn't work in Chrome. We actually need to include the vendor prefix. But we'll get to the vendor prefix in just a moment. For now, let's just talk about how this keyframes animation is going to be constructed. So we start with the @keyframes, and then we type space, and then the name that we want to give to our animation. And since this is going to be falling snow, we'll just call this animation snowfall, and then we'll put a set of opening and closing curly brackets. Then inside those curly brackets, we can put any number of keyframes to define what's going to happen at different points in our animation. Well, for this animation, it's pretty simple. We simply have a starting keyframe and an ending keyframe. And these keyframes are defined in terms of percentages. So if you want a certain CSS property to have a certain value at the very beginning of the animation, then you would put it in the 0% keyframe. So we'll type 0% and then a set of opening and closing curly brackets. And then inside those curly brackets, we could edit what we want certain properties to be. And here we're going to be editing only the bottom property of our snow layer. So at the very beginning of our animation, we want to align the bottom edge of our snow image with the bottom edge of our banner. And we've already set up the banner to have a position of relative. We've already set up our snow images to have a position of absolute. So all we need to do here is to give our bottom property a value of 0 pixels. And that will align, again, the bottom edge of that image with the bottom edge of the browser. Then, as we animate down, we're going to change this bottom value to a negative number, and that will pull the image down. If we gave it a positive number, it would push it up. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create another keyframe for 100%, and anything you put inside the 100% keyframe would occur when your animation is completely done. So we're going to animate from this 0% value to this 100% value. So in the 100% keyframe, we're going to set our bottom value to -300 pixels. And once we get to that -300 pixels, it will look identical to the way it looked at 0 pixels, because remember, the top half of the image looks identical to the bottom half of the image. And so that's what our animation looks like. Now, as it is, our browser won't know that we want to apply this snowfall animation to that specific image. We need to do that in our CSS, and we'll do that in just a moment. But for now, I want to go ahead and add our vendor prefix to our @keyframes animation. So we're going to put @ and then hyphen WebKit hyphen keyframes, and we'll talk more about the other vendor prefixes later. But for now, I'm just using WebKit because I'm testing it in a Chrome browser, which is a WebKit browser. So once we've created that, we can save our file. And again, this animation isn't doing anything yet because we haven't applied this animation to a specific object. And that's what we need to do now. So if we go back to our banner.html file, we can see our two snow images here and here, and they have a class of image snow01 for the background snow and image snow02 for the foreground snow. And they're both going to be calling on the exact same snowfall animation because both of these images are 600 pixels tall, and both of these images will work with those same keyframes. However, when we assign that animation to these two different images, we're going to assign a couple of different values so that the first image, the one in the background, is going to be moving slower than the one in the foreground. So let's tackle the background snow first, which is the img-snow01 class. And if we go to banner.css and scroll down to the bottom, you can see we've already created that class here. We've created both of those snow classes here where we defined the z index or the stacking order of those images. And for the snow01, let's go ahead and define our animation. So the way this is going to work is we would type animation, that would be the name of our property, and then we have a few values we're going to apply to this property. The first value is going to be the name of the animation that we created. And remember, the name, if we go back to animations.css, is this name that we gave it right here, snowfall. So we're going to point to that snowfall animation. So again, we have animation : space, the name of the animation we're calling on, which is snowfall, space, and then how long we want that animation to take. Well, this is the background animation, and we want this snow to be falling a little bit slower. So I want this animation to take about 5 seconds. And the way we type that is 5s for seconds, space. And then by default, these animations are going to ease in and out. So the speed of the animations is going to be slightly changing, which doesn't work well for a looping animation. For a looping animation, we want a constant rate of speed so that the snow always seems to be falling at the same rate of speed. And then we do that by assigning a value of linear here. So it will be a linear animation, it will be a constant rate of speed, and then we want to define how many times we want it to loop. And for our snow animation, we want it to loop infinitely, so we would use the keyword infinite. And this would loop over and over again as long as you have the browser window open. However, as we've mentioned before, this animation property at the time of this recording does not work with the current version of Chrome, so we need to use the -WebKit animation. We need to use that WebKit vendor prefix in order to get it to work. So let's see if that works. We're calling on the snowfall animation, which we created in our animations.css class. We're telling it we want to apply it to this class, this image snow01 class, so it will apply it to that background snow image. We want it to last 5 seconds, we want it to move at a constant rate of speed, and we want it to loop infinitely. So let's save all of our files, make sure all your files are saved. We'll jump back into our browser and then refresh. And now we can see the snow in our background is animating. And if we wait long enough, we'll see it loop. And hopefully we won't actually see it loop because it will be a seamless loop. And it looks really nice. We can't tell when it's looping because everything flows so smoothly. So now we're going to apply the exact same animation to our foreground snow. We're just going to make it move a lot faster. So we'll jump back into our code and then come down to image snow02, and we'll use that same vendor prefix, -WebKit -animation. We're going to point to the same snowfall animation, except this time I want it to last 1 second instead of 5 seconds. So this one's going to go by a lot faster. Again, we're going to apply a value of linear here so that it moves at a constant rate of speed, and then we want it to loop infinitely, so we'll put the keyword infinite there. Then we'll save our banner.css file, go back to our browser and refresh, and there we go. Now our front snow is moving a lot faster than the background snow, and it looks really nice. So that's how you would create a looping keyframed animation in CSS. Now, as we move forward, we're going to get into some more complicated animations that have multiple keyframes in them. So it's going to get a little bit harder to control, but we'll talk about a way that we can organize it and set it up so that we have absolute control over when things happen. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.